Alright, are we all ready? Okay, so now the negative team's philosophy seems to be that of street smarts. Now I'd just like to make a couple observations about this. My first observation is that according to the negative team's philosophy of street smarts, of trusting a local law enforcement, then they would have been against the Civil Rights Acts that were enacted by the federal government. They would be the pro-racism side. Because according to these street smarts, according to the localities in the South, then those localities, the local police were saying, oh, racism is fine. But the federal government was what said, no, there's a problem here. So the idea that I'm trying to state here is that just because there's a disagreement between the localities and the federal government doesn't mean that the localities always win. We need to take a step back and look at the real facts of the situation. And furthermore, I'll be proving to you in this speech that it is a smarter thing to do to actually get rid of this sanctuary policy. Let's call this the safe street smarts. And now in this speech I'll be going over the first negative constructive and then talking about the second negative constructive in that order. And furthermore, because a lot of the negative team's points overlap, I'll be saying the words cross-apply a lot. And whenever I say that, it just means that a response I made in one place also applies in another argument. So let's begin at the top of the 1NR, where they had several current system arguments. Their first current system argument was, well, similar to their fourth solvency argument. I believe that was, no, actually I apologize. Their first solvency argument and their first current system argument were very similar. The argument under these points was that the ICE doesn't have the capability to enforce law, nor are they required to enforce law. And their argument here essentially was that the affirmative team is only providing the ICE, or the affirmative team is only providing the ICE with deportation beds, but not the necessary deportation agents. Okay, well let's look to our 1AC. Let's look to mandate 2 of deportation dollars. Second sentence, 300 million will be allocated towards the addition of 1,000 immigration enforcement agents to the detention and removal operations. Turn this against the negative team, make it voting issue number 1 to vote for the affirmative team. We are providing the DRO, we are providing the ICE with exactly what the negative team says they need. We're giving the ICE the detention beds, we're giving them the necessary agents, and we are able to, as according to the advantage 2 evidence that was never addressed by the negative team, we are able to deport every single removable criminal alien in the United States. That's pretty good for having safer, smarter streets. Now let's move on to the second current system argument. The response here by the negative team was that the sanctuary cities don't interfere with federal enforcement. I have 2 responses to this. My first response is to cross-apply their argument under the current system number 1. They're saying that the ICE doesn't have the capability to enforce immigration law on its own. And here they're saying, oh, the cities are just standing back and letting the ICE do their job. Well, clearly the ICE can't do it all on its own. It needs the cooperation of the cities. My second response is by referring you back to my partner's argument of the IRP, the Institutional Removal Program, which was never responded to by the negative team. Let's move on to the third response, that of the current system. Their argument here was that New York City is safe. This is non-exclusive. Okay, New York City may be safe. We're not getting rid of that safety with an affirmative ballot. Furthermore, they asked for comparisons between sanctuary and non-sanctuary cities. Although I don't believe this is important, I'll give them the numbers right now. Let's move on to solvency point. Well, I guess that clears up the new arguments in the 1NR. Let's move on to the second negative constructive. Now, solvency point 1, that of bed space only. They claimed that agents were needed. Cross-apply my response there under current system number 1. Their second solvency point was that of deportees returning. And now I have 2 responses. My first response is that of a comparative advantage. If we deport these people, even if they come back to the United States, they're out of the United States for 1 week. 1 week that they cannot commit crimes. And my second, more powerful response is that a major reason for these people to come back to the United States is because these sanctuary cities exist. This is according to Michael Cutler in September of 2007. Aliens who seek to enter our country in violation of law to commit felonies. The establishment of sanctuary cities encourages them to attain their goals in our country. I apologize for the miswording of that evidence, but basically what it's saying here is that a major reason these criminal aliens return to the United States is because these sanctuary cities exist. Moving on to solvency point 3, the question here essentially was, where are we getting the 1 billion number for the SCAAP funding? Well, the current funding for the SCAAP is around $400 million. We're adding another 1 billion to that. Essentially, we're tripling the incentive for sanctuary cities to cooperate with the federal government. The fourth solvency point was essentially the same as solvency 1 in current system number 1. The idea here was that the ICE isn't required to investigate and therefore won't investigate unless it gets the necessary agents. Once again, we're giving them the agents. Moving on to solvency point number 5, they needed the numbers on how many people are being deported. Look to our advantage 2 evidence. We're deporting every single removable criminal alien in the United States. If the negative team has a problem with that, then they can disagree with the credentials of the Department of Homeland Security. Moving on to solvency point number 6, they're claiming that the courts will be clogged with an affirmative ballot. A major component of our affirmative case deals with deportable aliens who are already out of the court system, who have been issued final deportation orders. And finally, in response to the disadvantages, their first 2 disadvantages all deal with the idea that we're enforcing immigration law. We're not doing that. All it takes is a 15-minute phone call. Finally, disadvantage 3, this deals with deportees being abused in their home countries. Remember the criteria, homeland security, not Haiti, well, not the homeland security of Haiti. Thank you.